Welcome to Healing Honeys, the podcast for girls with big dreams trying to balance it all. I'm Louise Rumble, serial entrepreneur, type A overachiever, healing girly, and holistic wellness coach who also once got called the Jesus of modern dating. But let's get one thing straight. My healing era has never been calm. I'm talking savage dating stories, 20 cigarettes a day, daddy issues, an anxious attachment style, and an autoimmune disorder too. Today, I've spent thousands of dollars on healing and therapy, and now I'm here to guide you, love you, and laugh with you as I share my favorite tips, tricks, and rituals that have saved me along the way. With new episodes every Wednesday, expect girl talk, psychology, and the nervous system, as well as love, sex, and dating, wellness, fitness, and a little bit of business and spirituality too. So get in, honey. We are balancing healing, hustling, and life, and the best is yet to come. And if you're looking for ad-free listening or my somatic healing subscription daily devotion, just head over to the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Healing Honeys podcast. And today I'm joined by Joe Sheehey, founder of Cured Nutrition, and he has such an epic story. And it really relates to the journey that so many of us have gone on. So I'm really excited to share Joe's story, what he's learned, and also how we can utilize Joe's wisdom, Joe's knowledge, and Joe's experience to help the men in our lives as well. Because if you're listening to Healing Honeys, chances are you're a female. There's a lot of women that listen to this podcast, not exclusively, but I think that we also need to be thinking how we can support the people around us to evolve and grow, become healthier and happier, because those connections literally determine our happiness. So how are you, Joe? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited for the conversation to come.
Amazing. And I think where I want to start is I say that everything in life is either an expander or a contractor. And I think that can apply to jobs. I think that can apply to people, relationships, daily habits, etc., etc. I know that you've gone on the most amazing journey from being a NASA engineer. Is that correct?
Yes, I was a NASA engineer for a while.
That is so crazy. You've gone from that, and you're going to tell us all about how this unfolded, but you now own an incredible supplement and wellness brand, and you've gone on the most incredible personal journey too. And I think I want to start by asking, like, when you were in your old life, per se, when you were this NASA engineer, did you feel like you were doing what you were supposed to be doing, like what you were told you should have? Talk me through who Joe was when he was a NASA engineer.
Wow, you just nailed it. You said two words that I share quite frequently when I share my story, and they are that I was really good at accomplishing the shoulds and the supposed tos of the world, like really good. Every time I did, I found myself in the exact same place, empty still. And I think for all humans, but maybe men too, there's this relationship with our fathers that guides a lot of our life. And for me, I ended up as an engineer working for NASA, but I ended up there because I, at a young age, wanted to be a fighter pilot. My dad was a pilot, and I wanted to be like my dad. And I remember in third grade, I went to get a hearing and sight test, and I failed the sight test. And all I heard was like, yeah, you have to have great eyesight for that. Be a fighter pilot, to be an astronaut, to be anything that had to do with aerospace and planes and everything that I had so much interest in. And I didn't realize it, but when I look back on the time, I recognized that since I couldn't fly the planes, I wanted to figure out how to build them. And I thought that that would make my dad proud because I could be like my dad, but I could figure out how to build the things that allowed my dad to fly hundreds of people across the world. And it just ingrained this path in me that was one that really for me was like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do and I know what I should do. And I know that becoming an engineer is something that may be glorified, doctor, engineer, lawyer, like all those things that our world tends to prop up. And for a lot of us as we were younger. And so that's what I did from a young age into college. I was really good at doing what I thought the world wanted me to do. And when I got to the place where I was actually an engineer working for NASA, but I couldn't have felt more empty on the inside. And what's so crazy about all of it is there was a point where I almost didn't become an engineer. And it wasn't because I didn't think I could. It was because I almost didn't survive college. I almost ended my own life. And I think it would be helpful for us maybe to even dive into that, because I got to the other side of that dark place and I got to the place where I thought I was supposed to be, but I still felt that darkness and emptiness following me around. And so that's how I would define that stage of my life, was just like, oh, I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to, and the world is cheering for me, but I'm empty. And so what is it that I'm supposed to do with this life? Because I know I'm really good at working really hard. And I know I can achieve great things, but who am I doing it for? And what am I doing it for? And where is it leading me? And so that time in my life was just a time of like searching, like just recognizing that I was on this constant search, and it was on me to stop this search. Nobody else was going to do it for me, but I didn't know how to stop that. So, yeah, that's who I was at the time. I was just like, check all the boxes, every single one. And I think a lot of us can find us in that place and realize that maybe we need to start completely over.
Well, first of all, I'm so grateful for you being so vulnerable and sharing your lived experience and, the real darkness that this journey has taken you to. And I want to come into feeling empty. I think it's something that so many of us feel, but also just disconnect from. We stay so busy that we just don't actually ever feel it. But before we get there, I just want to go back to the father point, because it's a huge thing that we talk about on this podcast. And we always talk about it from a female perspective. I became a lawyer because of my father wound. My father was also a lawyer. It was like subconsciously I wanted to like get his approval, get his validation. But he never said to me, you should become a lawyer. I will only love you if you become a lawyer. I will only be proud of you if you become a lawyer. And I think that men don't talk about their father wound. I'm really grateful that we started off here. It's such a fascinating place to start. Did your dad ever say to you, you should become an engineer, you should become a fighter pilot? Or was this something that you had learned that if you did this, it would build a closer and stronger bond with him?
Such a good question. I learned it. And what's interesting is, as I've gone through more therapy than I even know how many years it's been, 15 years of therapy, I've just learned so much about it and that experience. What I've recognized is, as my dad was a pilot, he was gone a lot. So he would be gone for 4 or 5 days and then he would come home. And it was just this pattern of, well, my dad's working, but I thought there was just this absence that I didn't know how to relate with it. And then as I've gotten older, I really understood it. But as a young child, you don't understand it. And so I was just in this pattern of, my dad's gone. And now that I have 2 young kids myself, I recognize how much that can impact a child for no ill intent, just literally because my dad was providing for the family. But my dad would come home and I would try everything I possibly could to feel like I was getting his recognition, to get his attention. Like, I can remember from a very young age, I was so good at having the lines perfect in the grass. So it was mowed perfectly, because then I would get recognized. And that spilled into everything. It spilled into sports, it spilled into school, it spilled into pursuits. And so there was this underlying unspoken drive inside me to do whatever I could to get recognized by my dad. If my dad flew planes, but I couldn't fly planes, how could I get recognized by him? Okay, and I'm good at math, I'm good at science. And so, like, this is the path. And then that's the path that I took. And what I didn't realize till later in my life was, my dad's dad passed away when my dad was 19 years old. And my dad was the youngest of 5 kids, but that shuttled my dad into adulthood. And what I've now recognized as I've gotten older is that my dad never had an adult relationship with his dad. And so the way that he's related with me has been based off of 19 years of experience of knowing what it is to like to have a dad and then not knowing it at all. And it's not his fault, it's just his experience. And so it's always felt like I want to be recognized as my dad. And then it turned into, I want to be recognized as an adult. I want to be recognized as a man. And it went from the pursuits in engineering. It then went to bodybuilding for my physical body. And then it even went into me starting my business and how much money I could make. And dad, I'm going to do this much this month. And like, are you going to recognize me? It was this ongoing pattern. And it was quite literally caused by something that was not a direct intention by my dad. But it's so wild to recognize how that absence and presence, how much that can impact a child. And I used to have a lot of anger around it, and now I have a lot of love and appreciation around it, but it took a long time to get there.
The reason that I'm smiling is I've been smiling. If anyone's not watching on video, I've literally been smiling that whole way through you were speaking, because I literally feel like you are the male version of me. Like every single thing that you have gone through with your father, even down to my father losing his father at a really young age. And
Wow.
it's just so interesting to see how we're total strangers, right? We've lived such similar journeys. Literally for both of us, A plus B equaled C. It was like relationship with dad laid foundations of not feeling enough, not feeling consistently validated and attuned, equaled C. A persistent drive, which came out in different ways, exercise, our body, our businesses. I love that we are having this conversation because I do not think that men are sharing this, but I think we live in a male dominated society. You're not really allowed to feel the repercussions of like what comes with it. Would you say that that was part of what sent you to a dark place, which was maybe, I feel really empty, but I'm a man. I just have to do this. I have to succeed. I have to make money. Is that something that you went through?
Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't even know what the emotions were. I didn't know how to relate with them because I actually never saw my dad express emotions. So, I mean, if my dad passing away at 19 years old, he later in life showed me how dark his life got, and he abused drugs and alcohol. And he shared that with me actually not long after I really struggled with drugs and alcohol, which I really appreciated. But yeah, my dad never showed me what it was like to express his emotions. And so I think what happened for me was I got to a place where, you go to college and there's a bunch of 18-year-olds that like have no idea what they want to do with their life, have no idea who they are, but have all these like programs and things living inside of them that we don't know how to relate with. And for me, I had no idea who I was. I had no idea where I was really going. And I just found myself trying to get like that recognition, but friend groups. And so the only way that I could do it in college was to get drunk to escape myself. Then I would like the social anxiety walls would come down and then I could fit in. And it was just this pattern of like, oh, it looked like I had a lot of friends. It looked like I could relate with a lot of people, but I was a chameleon that was just dead on the inside, that was making decisions based off of what they wanted to do, what they gave me feedback on. So I'll do more of that. But I had no idea who I was. I was just like losing myself in every direction, but I had no idea emotionally on the inside what was actually going on. And so it hasn't been till later that I've really done a lot of the emotional work. And I did like so much therapy. And then like the last couple of years I did somatic therapy with a therapist that like sometimes I would just get on and she's like, what are we going to do today? I was like, I might just cry because you're probably
Yes.
going to make me cry. But that's been the piece of it was like, it was actually recognizing what is it that's going on the inside, and who is it, that little boy, and what is he looking for, and what is he feeling. And I had no idea what that, I couldn't relate with any of that in my darkest time. And so for me, what was social anxiety turned into substance abuse, turned into depression, turned into the darkest years of my life that I really had no idea what was actually causing it. But that sparked the whole journey that got me to Cured and the business that I started. But I mean, yeah, I think men relating with their emotions can make a man one of the most powerful and at the same time safe role models or individuals in anybody's life. And like those two words together are really important. There's this idea of power and there's a really negative connotation to it. because sometimes what we have on the inside, like if we suppress it, you'll hear the statement like, what you suppress you express sideways. And that was so true for me. I would just have anger, and I put holes in the wall when I was younger, and things would just come out so sideways because I didn't know how to express what I was actually feeling. But if you know how to express what you're actually feeling, you can be a powerful and safe man, and you can create a loving, safe environment for women and for your kids and for other people around you. And so that's all come from relating to my emotions, but I had no idea what I was dealing with when I was younger.
I am loving this conversation. And I hope for everyone listening, this is your reminder that there are healthier men out there, men who will go to therapy and they know what somatic therapy are and they understand how important, safety is within their relationships. And I'm loving this conversation. And it's so interesting that you say what you suppress, you will express. Like, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder of just chronic pain in my body. And after 6 years, I finally went into somatic therapy like you, and I realized, oh, this is everything I've suppressed my
Mm.
entire life. And it's so interesting to hear that for you, you would suppress it and then it would come out as anger. You are married with kids, right? Was there a Joe in relationships before the breakdown and then a Joe after? Because I imagine you're an incredibly healthy partner now, but maybe you weren't before. And there's no judgment here. I mean,
Yeah.
I was toxic as fuck before doing this work. So yeah, no judgment at all.
There was a Joe in relationship before my dark times, and that same Joe actually existed in relationship after those dark times. It wasn't until I met my wife and she really held up a mirror for me and actually broke up with me. And that was the first time I had been broken up with. And that just like broke everything for me, because how I was in relationship before my dark years and then after my dark years was I was in control in a manipulative way. And if I didn't want to be in the relationship, I was gone. I had never felt the other side of that. I had never felt like, well, I need to show up differently. I need to be a different man to be in relationship with a woman that I can honor and serve. And so it wasn't until I met my wife that I went into the depths of really figuring out who I am. But the journey started years before. And it was, I think the best way to describe it was, I thought I was in control. I was in fake control, and I would do whatever I possibly could to minimize my mistakes and point fingers outwards. And it just didn't work. And I was empty on the inside too. And so thank you to my wife for breaking up with me, because you set me on a journey to become who I really wanted to be in relationship.
Oh, I love that. And that's just sometimes part of the journey, isn't it? Someone being a mirror to you. And sounds like that's exactly what she was. And it sounds like you were able to control everything, control the career path, control the relationships you were in, control your body. If you were bodybuilding, I mean, there's so much control with food and macros and weighing and discipline. And like, at what point did it just get so dark? Was there a point when you were just like, I can't do this anymore? You've said empty. Like, was it just like, what's the point if I'm empty? If you feel comfortable going there, we'd just
Yeah.
love to understand what happened.
I mean, there's really two big events. And one of them was in college where I almost ended my life. So one night I was blackout drunk, and it was because I was on social anxiety medication. And my psychiatrist said, do not drink alcohol. And I just continued to drink alcohol. And I was in a relationship at the time, and I got tricked. We were at a concert and I got triggered, and I just lost it on my girlfriend. And then I got pissed at one of my friends, and I had gotten a physical altercation with him, and I got kicked out of the concert. And I remember just being so embarrassed. I got thrown down to the ground by the guards, and then they put me in the party bus to literally sit in like a shame cloud until everybody else left the concert. And I was in and out of the blackout on our way back to Boulder. And then we got back to a friend's house, and I was still just a complete mess. And I was in an argument with my girlfriend, and I ended up just like, I'm out of here. And I left. And halfway home, there's a bridge that I had ended up climbing over the guardrail, and I was coming out of a blackout, and I was recognizing that I was standing on the other side of the bridge, looking down at the rocks below me, ready to jump off and end my life. And It was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, random Tuesday morning. But somebody was down there underneath the bridge that stopped me. And he said, don't do it. He said, can I come up there? And I just burst into tears. And he climbed up the rocks and he pulled me over the guardrail. And by the time he pulled me over the guardrail, my girlfriend at the time had caught up to me. And he took my phone, put his phone number in my phone and texted himself. And I didn't know that he did that. But that night, my girlfriend at the time walked me home. I took a handful of Xanax and I woke up under 24-hour surveillance in the hospital the very next day. And the doctors asked all the questions, like, what are we going to find in your system? And I was like, what are you not going to find in my system? My parents were actually at the hospital that time and got called to the hospital. And they were standing over me when I was talking to the doctor. And I just remember me sharing all the drugs I had been taking and the life just like sucking out of my parents, because they quite literally almost lost their son, but their son had completely lost himself, and they just heard what I was doing to myself. And that was when I was pulled out of Boulder, Colorado, where I was going to school, and I started seeing therapists left and right, and I got put on more antidepressants. And that was actually what led me to finding the bodybuilding world. That was what initially saved me, was putting all that pain into something different, something physical. But it was like a hard reset because I was pulled out of my college town. I had no friends anymore. I was living with my parents and I was trying to finish my 4th year of engineering school. And so that was like the first really, really dark pivot, and like something had to change, but it was like quite literally just like a physical relocation. But that was where part of my later story really started to come to life, was because I was suggested antidepressants, suggested this, suggested that, and it made things worse in the short term. It wasn't helping me. And I just had so much resistance because I was like, I think there's something else. And the reason that I thought there was something else wasn't until like I realized it later in my life. But my mom's side of the family really struggled with alcoholism. I've had 4 people in my family die directly from alcohol. It almost killed me too that night. But me growing up, I opened up the cabinets all the time. Orange bottles with white caps, orange bottles with white caps. And I realized at that time when I was in this dark place, that's where they were instantly putting me. And so I just became so resistant to it. And that was when I really started doing so much therapy, CBT. Like I learned how to meditate, and I didn't know I was learning how to meditate, but my therapist would just lie me on the ground and he would say, Joe, just lay flat and focus on your stomach expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. And every time you have an intrusive thought come in, go back to your stomach, in and out. It wasn't until years later I was like, oh, my therapist, who's ironically named Joseph, was teaching me how to meditate. But that was like this pivot of starting to figure out this holistic alternative path, because my mom, bless her heart, as I was so resistant to antidepressants, she also introduced me to Dr. Andrew Weil, who, if you're familiar with, is the founder of True Food and the Center for Integrative Medicine at U of A. And he does a lot of studies on herbalism. He does a lot of studying on natural remedies. He wrote the book Spontaneous Healing, and they talk about vitamin D, fish oil, and like all these natural ways of operating. So that was like a huge turning point in my life, as I was like, okay, there's an alternative route. But to fast forward further, when my wife broke up with me, I was about 2 years into building my current business. And we were both triggering each other so intensely at the same time. While I felt like I was losing her because I could no longer control her, it was triggering her eating disorder. And she had struggled with an eating disorder most of her life and ended up going to inpatient treatment while we were triggering each other. But that relationship was falling apart. My business was falling apart. And that was where I met a group of men that I'm still in this men's group with. That was the final chapter. So it was like the holistic, like what can I do with supplements and working out and physically? But then the next was meeting a group of men that I can go deep with, that I can share what's going on in my relationship with. I can share my deepest, darkest secrets and my shame, and them still just hold me. That was the healing of the father wound. That was the healing of the man wound. And so the father wound and being in relationship with men and being vulnerable with men, not being in competition with men. And so those were the two main like pivotal turning points of my life. Was like one was like this holistic alternative route, and then one was like, what does it look like to be a man and be in relationship with other men and be okay with not being okay. And all of that has combined to allow me to become who I am.
Oh, incredible. Yeah, you've made so many amazing points. And I think the not being in competition with men is such an important one. You know, hearing a man saying the word shame, I'm like, no wonder that the journey has started to work out better for you, because this is exactly the things that you need to be doing to really experience change. So I'm very grateful for you sharing that. And I have a couple of references for men's groups in the UK that I can put in the show notes as well. So if you have any that you want to add, we can do that afterwards, just in case anyone's listening and is like, yeah, my husband or my partner, my boyfriend, like he needs to do that. I also think it's so interesting what you say around the meds and it actually making everything worse, because again, exactly the same for me. I remember taking my first ever SSRI aged 18 and it just fucked me up so badly. I was having like night visions and night terrors and oh my God, I was just such a mess. When was the moment when you were like, hey, I think that there's a way that I can heal myself that doesn't involve prescription medication? Like, what was the first supplement you discovered?
A fish oil, honestly, like
No, I
literally
love it.
high dose fish oil. And there's actually a lot of studies around serotonin production and just I think actually just like high dose fish oil and high dose vitamin D for depression, helping with depression because it helps with inflammation. The fish oil helps with inflammation. And that was like my original path. But what's even crazier is that Dr. Andrew Weil, if you really look back into his history, he was one of the first doctors to start talking about cannabis and using it from a medical standpoint. And he was just blasted with so much hate for so long because of culture of like your brain on drugs and you go into marijuana and then you end up at heroin. And so like it was interesting because as I was doing all the drugs in college, I was using cannabis. So there was a time where as I pursued bodybuilding and really started like my physical transformation, I was completely sober. But cannabis was actually being legalized in Colorado and had all this interest in Dr. Andrew Weil. And as I was bodybuilding and I was in my initial years as an engineer, I was really just focusing on nutrition. I was focusing on my physical health. So I was very much lifting weights, but also doing a lot of cardio. And I was just so on point with my nutrition and my supplements. And so it's like all this stuff's really working for me. It's helping me change. I'm feeling like the physical transformation affect my mental health and mental state. And then it was so interesting because I would sit in my cubicle and back where we started this conversation, I would listen to podcasts, specifically Joe Rogan. I just remember him saying this quote at one point. He was quoting Thoreau, but he says, most men live lives of quiet desperation. I remember just like working these long hours, 10, 12 hours in my cubicle, designing parts. And I was like, is that me? Like I did all the supposed to's and shoulds and I got here and I look around at my colleagues. They've been doing this for 30, 40 years. They don't seem happy. Is that going to become me? I feel like I want something else. And so that was probably 4 years into my engineering career, but cannabis was legalized in Colorado and they send out this big company wide communication. And I worked for a federally funded company. So you work for the government, essentially, is what the message said. Just because cannabis has been legalized does not mean you can use it and still have a job at this company. I remember that day being like, oh, this is really interesting. Because I remember hearing my colleagues read the email and some responding, like, why do they care about this? Like, this is fine. I used to literally go into the woods and use cannabis and like hike, and I felt connected to nature. And I was like, oh, like, there was actually some times that was true for me. And there was times where I was like creative and used it and it helped me sleep and it helped my anxiety. And then there was others that had this opinion of like Cheech and Chong stoner mentality. You're going to end up on the couch. You're going to eat the potato chips. And I was like, this is so interesting how different these opinions are. And I just knew that this was going to be a big opportunity. But what I recognized was that the narrative around cannabis to actually be considered holistic wellness, the narrative had to change. The image had to change. The people that use it, the people that are like the image of the product had to change it. And so I had all these desires and this excitement around holistic health and herbs and movement and sunlight and water and nutrition. And I was bodybuilding. And so I was like, okay, well, this bodybuilding world has a lot of people that have similar stories, which is very interesting. The more people you meet in like the bodybuilding and fitness world, the more you recognize this pattern of story of like this pain on the inside turns into like I can move through it physically. And so I just recognized that this industry, the fitness industry, had an opportunity to be a new face to cannabis. And that was what actually really sparked everything I do now. But I got to this point where I was starting to have all these ideas. But with all these ideas and with what felt really stagnation in my career, I actually started to get depressed again because I was like, oh, like I have this great idea and I feel like I could pursue something else. And this bodybuilding thing has momentum and it has community and it has opportunity. But still, I'm waking up every day and I'm going to clock in and I'm just feeling stuck. And I felt more and more stuck every single day that I stayed in my career and didn't answer what felt like another calling on my life. And it all led to this point where my boss just belittled me one day. Looking back on it, I recognize that I was partly checked out. I used to have all the anger towards my boss. I'm like, F you, like you belittled me in front of all my colleagues. But I could also recognize that I was probably checked out. And I left my office that day and I was just like, I feel like I'm getting depressed again. And I was sitting in traffic and I was just like starting to break down. I remember slamming my fists on my steering wheel, like, why the F are you back in this place, Joe? And I recognized that there was the life that I wanted to live, which was not the life that I was living. And then there was a life that I was actually living. That gap is what I call the chasm. That is the thing that causes anxiety, which leads to depression. It's who you want to be and who you actually are. If you can't get those into alignment, you're always going to feel this dissonance. I saw a therapist that night and you can't see it, but behind me on the bookshelf, there's this picture frame. And on the picture frame is a card. I sat in the therapist's office for like 45 minutes and I was sharing my ideas, but I was also sharing my life and how I feel like I'm stuck in this career and I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to. And he just stopped me at one point. He's like, Joe, like, I hear everything you're saying, but I just need to give you something. And I'm going to give this to you. And I don't think you're going to come back as a client, to be honest. And he reaches in his desk and he pulls out this card and he writes something on it and he hands it to me and I flip it over. And on the backside, it just says permission. And he goes, Joe, you're waiting for permission from everybody in the outside world, but nobody's going to give it to you besides yourself. He handed it to me. I left his office that night. I put in my letter of resignation. That night, 9:30 p.m., I went to the office, clocked in, like shaking, put it on HR's desk, and just quit. And the next day I woke up and that was like the turning point of everything that has become the business that I started. But it was just like all these small components coming together. That was like the final turning point that the next day I had jumped off the entrepreneurial cliff and I've just been building the airplane on the way down. But yeah,
Wow.
those were all the components that came together.
Oh my goodness, I had goosebumps listening to that. The identity split of who you are and who you want to be, and you explaining how you started to feel depressed again. Like it's a biological experience, like the stress response of inaction, the stress response of not believing that there's a way out. That is the nature of the freeze in the nervous system. So I always say to people that I work with that are depressed, I explain exactly this. This is a little bit abstract, but I think it's really important to note here as well that to be able to bring a body out of freeze, so to be able to bridge the gap that you were in from where you were and who you wanted to be, you need to have cellular energy in your body. And I believe that the reason that you were able to bridge that gap when you were given that permission slip is because you had been doing the bodybuilding and had been lifting the weights. You had trained your body internally to have that internal cellular energy.
Mm.
So when it was time to jump, you were like, let's fucking go. It's now or never. And for some people listening to this, they'll be thinking, oh, I can't do that. You don't understand. It's not going to work for me. And I think this is where it comes back to like the foundations of your health are quite literally make or break to everything you do in your life. And so I'm obsessed with like the permission slip, but also the fact that I believe you were cellularly optimized to be able to go and jump into the unknown. Do you think that while a little abstract, that's a fair thing to say?
First off, I love abstract and I can play in that world all day long. Because if I wasn't building this skill set of meditation and the relationship with the voice in my head and just the physical, like what I could physically move through, if I wouldn't have had all of that, I wouldn't have had the trust in this physical body, but also like the spiritual body to be able to move through what feels like so much resistance. But it was that trust. Like if you don't have that relationship, I think sometimes for a lot of people, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, but I think once you recognize how to physically change your body, then you know that you can mentally change your body and then you can spiritually evolve your body. I think physical for me was the best catalyst to that. I haven't thought about it that way, but you nailed it because I remember that next morning waking up, the first thing I did was I went on a walk with the sunrise. It was like I knew what to do. I knew how to support myself. And I saw this big, scary unknown in front of me, but I knew I had the tools and the skill set to take it on. Yeah, you nailed it. I had never thought about it that way.
I love it. And I also think I love that you mentioned the spiritual body and your path because I've been talking a lot recently about expansion and contraction. But I truly believe that when you are on the correct spiritual path and you know when you are not, you know it mentally, you know it physically, you know it in your gut, you can ignore it for as long as you want, years, decades. But when you just start to follow the thing that lights you the fuck up, and it's not always going to be positive, that you were probably scared shitless, but excited. And I always say you can change your life in a micro moment. And that's exactly what you did. Do you think it's fair to say, like, you just knew in your soul, now is the time? He gave you permission. It's now or never, like, it's time to jump, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I actually saw this just recently. The reason that this path feels so hard when you're answering the call to something big is because God believes that you are strong enough to handle it. And I was like, oh, yeah, like entrepreneurship is so hard. I want to give up. It used to be every other day. Now it's like once a month. Doesn't happen as much,
That's
but
good.
yeah, maybe I'm lying. Maybe it's every other week. But I think that that's without that, like that spiritual connection and belief that God has a big calling on my life and recognition that it is hard because God believes that you can handle it. You could think about that in so many different ways, but I think the way that is really empowering is to just recognize that the reason it is hard and it feels hard is because you're answering the call to something bigger than you could ever imagine. So of course it feels like that. It's because you're choosing something greater for yourself. And so it will feel hard.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
this. I love this so much. And I also think you know when you're not on the right track, you know when something's not working or a relationship's not working. And I think you have to learn to pivot. One of the things I've learned in running 3 businesses is just like, I've had to say goodbye to my old perfectionist. And don't get me wrong, I'm still type A as fuck. Like, I'm definitely perfectionist.com. But it's like pivot, test, and learn, pivot, test,
Mhm.
and learn in every area of my life. Would you say that you've been able to let go of some of those controlling perfectionistic tendencies to just sort of ride the wave? And I know we're never going to let go of them totally.
Yeah, I've gotten way better at it because I've made enough mistakes, big ones in business, and recovered from all of them. When I first started, it was fire aim. I was just like, go. And then I was course correcting. And I lost that for a little while. And now I'm much more back into that because I am a very healthy leader now. And I'm not afraid to communicate directly. I'm not afraid to say, this is where we're at and we can be better. But I think what doing that does is allows the team, hopefully, to take more risk, which then means that I'm not in control and I'm not trying to perfect everything. But can you build a culture and environment that empowers people to take initiative and to understand that it's okay to make mistakes? And can you, as the leader who's been through the years and has made the mistakes and has recognized that you can recover from them, bring that into your culture, which then allows you as the leader to be less type A and perfect and kind of just let go? but empower and create momentum. And so that creates a space for freedom and flexibility that doesn't require perfection, but just requires vision on the ultimate goal. And if everybody can see themselves in that, then you can let go more as the founder, more as the entrepreneur. But you got to set the direction. I still like things to be excellent. Like I like them to be
For
excellent. I like
sure.
them to be really good, which I think is important. I think you have to have high standards, but I think you have to be honest with yourself when that's turning into like paralyzing perfection. There's a fine line between the
Fine
two.
line.
So
Yeah,
I
there's
play that
absolutely.
line a little bit, I'd say.
Yeah, we all do. We all do for sure. And so I know that one of your top selling products is Serenity, which is a product that's formulated with that microdose of THC and also the adaptogens and the functional mushrooms that we talk about so much on this podcast. And that is obviously to like help with the stress of day-to-day life. So I'd love to understand like what your day-to-day looks like to build and optimize a life where like you can now hold the stress. Cause I mean, running a business is so fucking stressful. You're a dad, you have kids, you are literally doing it all. Like, how have you built a life that can hold that stress rather than the old you 20 years ago would have crept into anxiety, would have crept into depression, and then would have started that downward paralyzing cycle again?
Yeah. I'd like to say that all of my practices, the physical practices, the spiritual practices, the diet, the nutrition, all of that makes me able to handle stress and not have to use anything else. But the honest truth is like sometimes I just need something else to help me. And I think that that's most people's truth. And that's where, from a product standpoint, we really started to think about what are the things that most humans struggle with. A lot of people struggle with sleep, and a lot of people struggle with stress. And so what can we do to relate with it? Well, one, we can do all the things that we talk about from a holistic perspective, and we should. And supplements should be supplemental to that. They should be additional to that. They should be part of everything. But Serenity is a product. It comes in a gummy form. It contains L-theanine, ashwagandha, reishi mushroom, which is a functional mushroom, and then microdose THC, and then a higher dose of CBD. And we had a clinical herbalist that does all our product formulation design that product to allow you quite literally to exhale and unwind without escape. And that was where the cannabis industry, and I would say the alcohol industry and a lot of other industries get it wrong. There's a point where it becomes an escape, and that's not a daily wellness practice that's actually sustainable. So we created something that, yes, it has THC in it, but it has such low dose THC in it and it's combined with those other adaptogens that it's meant to be used as a, like I can exhale at the end of the day, but I don't check out. I don't escape. I'm not high. I'm relaxed. I feel better than drinking a glass of wine, but it doesn't impact my sleep. There's no negative impacts on my sleep, and I wake up refreshed the next day. And so for me, I use that product every day around 3, 4 p.m. It gives me a little like euphoric creative feel, but also helps me really unwind. And so for me, 3, 4 p.m., that's when I go into creative mode. I have creative mode in the morning, but I also have creative mode later in the day. I'll turn on some music and I'll just work on the next big campaign, the next big vision, like what's the next creative ad. It kind of gives you this euphoric unwind that is not something that actually makes you anxious, because some people are scared. Like I would say for me, actually, if I do high dose cannabis, I get anxious. I'm like, this is not what I'm looking for. Like I wanted to relax, but now I feel anxious and I'm back in a worse place than I had ever gone. So we wanted to create something that like changed people's perspective on cannabis. If you do the right dose of THC and you combine it with those other adaptogens, you get the calming effects, but you don't feel like you have that worry or paranoia that some people feel like they have if they take like a normal edible. And a normal edible, just for everybody that might not know, is like between 5 and 10 milligrams of THC. We do 1 milligram. So it's very, very small. We derive it from the hemp plant and it's legal nationwide in the US. We released an ad that was like, it's for the mom, it's for the entrepreneur, it's for the dad, it's for the teacher, it's for, well, it's actually for anybody that has stress, which is like all people, right? And so it's just meant to like, can you be present with your kids, with your family, and have a clean conscience because you're not escaping. And I think many people turn to alcohol. I also think a lot of people are turning away from alcohol and are interested in an alternative. And so that's exactly what Serenity is.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I mean, that end of day, like everyone has their escape, don't they? You know, I'm 7 years sober, so it would have used to have been alcohol for me, but now it's like food. I just would love to have a pizza every night in front of the TV, like, but that is not going to help me reach my goals in life. So it's like, okay, I have one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks. Like, it's about building something into your life that isn't an escape. And I love
Mhm.
how this is like a healthy supplementary tool, because there's only so long you can go escaping until everything comes crashing down.
I mean, let's be real, like life can smack us in the face. When you do everything that you can to be resilient, when those life events do happen, like the pendulum does swing, but it swings back quicker and it doesn't go to the other extreme. It just comes back to even, to homeostasis. It's a never ending process, right? Like we're continually learning, and some things don't serve us that used to serve us. But for us, we wanted to create something that was sustainable and could serve as many people as possible in a problem that most humans struggle with. Life
Mm.
is stressful, and that's not a bad thing. It's how you relate to the stress, because a lot of stress can be good. And let's be real, like when you're pursuing something big with your life, it should feel stressful. It would be a fallacy to tell yourself that it's not going to be stressful. But how are you going to support yourself and how are you going to relate with it? That's the ultimate determining factor to where you go, to if
Oh,
you're going to get there.
100%. And I'm glad you said the word resilience, because, like, I do a lot of work with high performing women who have no resilience left because they function under cortisol so much, pumping, that their adrenals are like, no, I can't do this anymore. And then it fucks their hormones, then they get PCOS. And so a huge part of my work is resilience. And that's why we're sat here talking today, because, you know, your product has reishi in it, for example. Like, one of the things that I will take every time I have a smoothie is I will put a tincture of reishi in, because building that internal cellular resilience, so important. I think you might be the only supplement we've ever interviewed on this podcast ever in the
Wow.
history of, like, yeah, 260 episodes or
Wow.
250 episodes or something like that. So I'm hoping that everyone listens, understands like why we're having this discussion. I think they will have understood from this conversation that, yeah, you get it with what you've built. It's that resilience. You're right. It just helps you be able to relate to the stress better.
We've got one life, and it's now. It's like, let's go. It's now or never. You really just don't know who you can be until you say yes and fully commit. You blow
100%.
yourself away.
100%. Yeah, like you just got to go all in. And I always say that, like, I will never leave this life with any regrets. I've given every single thing in my life 150%. If it didn't work out, I just know it wasn't meant to be. And you're right, like when you have the foundations in place, I can go for weeks, if not months on end of like functioning literally like a psychopath, like at levels of like unsustained performance, because I'm going to the gym and I'm doing my somatic shaking every day. I'm doing 5 minutes of breath work. I'm regulating my blood sugar. I'm taking my like serenity or putting my reishi in my smoothies. Like, the foundations are so critical. And that's why I love this episode, because you're not here just saying like, oh yeah, you know, just take this supplement and everything will be good. It's like, no, you have to take responsibility for the foundations of your life. You have to take responsibility for the foundations of your health. Here is something that can like be a part of those foundations.
100%. Yeah, you
Love
nailed
it.
it.
Love it.
You nailed it.
Okay, I think we're done. Unless you have anything else that you want to share or that you feel we didn't cover.
No, I just really appreciate this conversation and allowing me to share and, share things that I haven't actually shared before. So thank you for that. And thank you for creating this space, because it's important to get these conversations out. And I hope any, well, you said mostly females are listening to this, but I hope that it gets shared with any males that this message can help.
100%. So if you're listening to this and you think of someone in your life that could benefit from this episode, share it on. And everything to do with Joe and Cured Nutrition will be linked in the show notes. We also have a discount code for all products on site, which is Healing Honeys. And there's a specific link that you guys need to click. That's also going to be linked in the show notes. And you can check out the website. Serenity is the top selling product by far, but there's a ton of amazing products on there.
It's the best place to start. It'll help you with stress support and sleep support, and that goes so far in your life. And I guess one thing that I'll note is all of our products are designed by a clinical herbalist. And so if you look further into it, there's a lot of intention behind the formulas. We don't just throw the kitchen sink at things. It's done by somebody who works one-on-one with clients, but then scaled it for the masses. So thank you so much. This was honestly amazing.
My pleasure. And I will also say the reason that you are here on this podcast today is because your products are with organic ingredients. They're grown without synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. They're lab tested and they have zero additives, no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. So anyone that knows me knows that like I hate being an influencer because literally 90% of the time I'm saying no to products because I'm like, I cannot promote that. That is so full of shit. Like how, I don't even care if you're going to pay me. I actually can't put my name to that. So you are doing everything right with this formulation. Love the brand, love the journey. And I love today's discussion. It's been really powerful. Thank you for being so vulnerable, so open. Yeah, I feel really lit up. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Speak to you soon.